Hello everyone and welcome back to another Kerbal Space Program video, and in today's Kerbal Space Program video we're going to be performing a mission in which we send two brave Kerbals to the surface of Duna along with this cute little rover you can see me constructing here. The Kerbals will drive the rover around, do some science, do some epic stunts, and definitely not crash it. And then once the mission is done, the two Kerbals can then return to Kerbin to share with their peers all of the science and stuff that they learned on Duna. So that's what we're doing in this video. Admittedly, slightly smaller in scale than last week's Kerbal adventure, which of course was my movie Into the Warp, many weeks in the making, and I really hope that you guys enjoyed it if you've seen it, which I'm assuming a lot of you will have seen it, or at least part of it. Hope you enjoyed it. I was very proud of how it came out. And now we're going back to normal KSP content as usual for the time being. Those films are very draining to make and very difficult. I can't reasonably sustain. It's like once every year or 2 years I make those films. Anyway, I still think that this rover is pretty nice design, and one thing that's kind of cool about it is it's got this unique little shell in which we have the two Mark II fuselage probe cores forming the actual sides of the chassis, and then the Kerbals sit inside. It's like a little armoured vehicle, and I ended up calling it the Turtle because I guess it kind of looks a bit like a turtle, but not really. But yes, going on about the design, I cannot take full credit for the aesthetic. I actually saw a rover on the subreddit that used this setup of having the two Mark II probe cores either side of a rover's core, and the Kerbals sit inside. But I was on my phone at the time, so I just made a mental note to just check the subreddit later on my PC so I could make a note of the URL of the post. But either the OP deleted the post or my Google foo just sucks. But I couldn't find the post to credit to the guy that inspired this rover's design. So very sorry if you're out there and watch my videos and are now fuming about the lack of credit and recognition. I tried my best. If anyone knows the post I'm talking about, or the OP is watching, just leave a comment down below, and hopefully people will thumb it up so I'll see it, and I'll add it to the video description. But yes, I did take a few sort of artistic liberties myself. Really, the only thing I remembered from that rover before I started building this was the fact it was two Mark II fuselages either side of the cockpit there. So the rest of the design is all mine. I mean, obviously there'll probably be some similarities, but I think this is pretty original, and I wanted to come up with a way here. As you can see, I was trying to come up with a way of allowing the Kerbals to embark and disembark the craft, and in the end I decided to go with this sort of custom door. It's like a sort of frame that unfolds and opens. So there's three action groups that set the sequence off. We've got one action group that deploys those elevons at the top, which allows kind of enough space for the vertical support to open up, and then the horizontal ones open up as well after that. So there's the three action groups. I think it's like 6, 7, and 8. Not sure. Just check the action groups in the vehicle assembly building before you launch this if you want to fly this yourself using the craft file from the video description. I would recommend putting an extra battery in there for it to work, because I did make a bit of a mistake that will transpire later on, so I won't spoil the surprise. We've got to get that viewer retention bumped up, guys, so there's going to be lots of twists, lots of turns, lots of memes as the video goes on. So yeah, we've pretty much finished constructing the rover now, but that's only part of the puzzle, really. Building rovers is really fun, but what makes them challenging, and the part I like about them, is that it's often quite an interesting engineering puzzle to get them to safely land on a celestial body, especially one that doesn't have an atmosphere, or in Duna's case, an atmosphere so tenuous that engines are required at some stage in the landing to allow sufficient deceleration. And I also said that I wanted some sort of mechanism of getting the Kerbals who control the rover back home once the rover mission is done. So I tried a few different designs with how this setup could work. So I had one system where it would be like a sky crane. So there would be a separate lander for the Kerbals and a separate lander that would land the rover, and the two would land next to each other, and the Kerbal lander would land in a vertical orientation so it could easily take off. But that was just quite complicated, and I've always liked the rule of, keep it simple, stupid whenever you can. It's a great saying for a reason, so I thought, what is the easiest way of doing this? So in the end, I decided to go for this setup here, where we have the rover flanked front and back by these fuel tanks, and I'm going to put some side-mounted boosters to them that will allow powered landing in this horizontal orientation. This obviously then leaves the issue that the actual return craft that the Kerbals are going to be using to get home is facing the wrong way. So I've added those air brakes there that will serve as a kickstand. So once this is all detached and all separated, those air brakes can deploy, and that will push the cockpit, hopefully, into a vertical position, and then the Kerbals can just take off and fly home as normal. Now, I do add, I'm going to say it now because I've got a bit of a habit of saying, like, I'll talk about this when it arrives at the time on screen, and then I forget to do that when it actually happens. I'm going to say it now. I did make a bit of a mistake with the decoupler that attaches to the aerospike. I haven't added it yet, but I add a decoupler that will obviously join the aerospike to the stage below it, but I put the decoupler on the wrong way round, so when it decouples, it still remains attached to the aerospike. There you go, you can kind of see it there. The eagle-eyed among you may have noticed it. Blink and you miss it though. But don't worry, the decoupler, the engine, does still work. The actual engine plume just goes through the decoupler that's sort of floating there, unsupported, kind of ominously. So that was one error, and obviously I mentioned the electric charge that will become apparent as we get there. If some of you are still a bit clueless as to why I mentioned that I was a bit lackluster on my electric charge supply. Now I've got that Apollo-style cockpit at the very top of the stack with a launch escape system there. It's not really needed. I just wanted to increase the hypothetical safety rating of this rocket. Of course, in Kerbal Space Program, launch escape systems are not necessary unless you're playing in hard mode, because you could just revert the flight, but I wanted this to kind of have some sort of realistic layer to it. So for the actual mission to Duna, before we actually do the rover segment of the mission, the Kerbals will be sitting up in that top cockpit. So if at any point during the launch, they can easily just abort and be pulled free from the rest of the stack. If they're using that Mercury-style cockpit, sorry, I meant Gemini-style cockpit, they're kind of squished right in the center of the rocket, making any kind of abort impossible to do. So just for safety's sake, we've added there. And there they are, Jebediah and Valentina sitting atop the mighty rocket as we blast off the launch pad and make way for Duna. Now, I didn't actually get my transfer window very good. Like, I just had a look at the map screen and saw I was basically nearly at a Duna transfer window, so I was like, this will do. So we do expend a little bit more fuel than we would have otherwise done if we'd waited a little bit longer during the actual interplanetary flight, but it's all fine. I don't know why I'm talking about this now, because it's not what's happening on screen. What's happening on screen is just our standard ascent profile from Kerbin, so initiating our gravity turn very slowly after we launch the craft, tipping over to be facing about 45 degrees by the time we reach approximately 10 kilometers above the ground. It's a pretty nice ascent profile to follow, and there we are, piercing through the cloud layer as we break past the 400 meter per second barrier. Not got much more to really add, to be honest, for this particular part of the mission. I mean, I've talked about General Kerbin Ascent so much on this channel at this point that I don't really know any other way to spice it up, so I could just talk about something else. But I don't know what else there is to talk about. I've just got back from a day of work, and I think I speak for not just myself, but for a lot of us, that life has become strange, right? It's mainly just work, and then you go home. You don't really have much chance to do anything else at the moment. So, I mean, what even happened at work? I mean, actually, there was kind of a funny thing that happened. Not today. A couple of weeks ago, the other day, right? I was walking down the corridor towards my room that I was working in, and I was walking through one of the waiting areas, and I heard this weird alarm go off, and it was it sounded a little bit like an air raid siren, but I don't know. It was just a really weird. I don't know how to describe it. It was like an alarm sound, basically, but quite an obnoxiously loud one. And I was like, what is that sound? And one of the nurses came out of her office, one of the senior nurses came out of their office, and she was like, what is that alarm? And I was like, I've never heard that alarm before. And everyone was freaking out, saying, what's making why is there an alarm going off, and where is it, and what is it signifying? We were frantically running down for a while, trying to figure out the source of this noise. And eventually we tracked it down to be coming from the waiting room, the waiting room area. So we had a look at peek inside, and we were tracking down the noise, saying, where is it coming from? We traced it down to this one old gentleman just sitting there, and we asked him, is that coming from you, that sound? And he was like, sorry, what? And I was like, there's an alarm going off. Is that anything on your person that's making it? And he just said, oh, it might be my phone, and just pulled out this gigantic phone, and it was going off, and as soon as he pulled it out of his pocket, the sound of the alarm just amplified, and we were like, oh, okay. That's kind of funny. It's just this guy's phone making this alarm sound. I mean, it's one of those visually impaired phones designed for elderly people with other impairments, so everything on it's really big. It's got massive numbers on the keypad. It's obviously got a very, very loud alarm to make it really easily heard. Probably not loud enough by the sounds of things, but yeah, that was kind of a funny incident that happened a while ago. That's it. My work is not really that interesting, I find, for commentaries, and if it were, I can't really talk about it anyway, because obviously confidentiality laws and all that would prohibit me from discussing. But there we are. By the way, I mentioned that my Duna transfer window wasn't great. We have to spend a little bit more fuel than we otherwise would normally have to, because I normally do get my transfer windows a little bit better, and we can all sing along now what the transfer window is. If you draw a line from Kerbin to the sun to Duna, the angle that line forms at the sun would be about 45 degrees. And I think for this mission, it was probably close to like 60 or 50 or something like that. So probably should have waited a little bit longer for Kerbin and Duna to get a bit closer before launching. But we needed to get this mission underway. We desperately needed that science. So it was worth it. Jebediah and Valentina, they were really, really anxious to get back into space. So we decided, let's just add a bit more fuel and it'll be fine. And now we're going to commence our interplanetary burn. I'm using that Wolfhound engine there, not because it's better than the nuclear engine. The nuclear engine is the best engine of choice for these sorts of burns, but I'm an impatient person. I just said that we launched the rocket too early because I wanted to get it underway. Same thing for the nuclear engine. Whilst it's more efficient, you could just strap a few more boosters to your rocket and you can take in something like this where we need a little bit more fuel, a little bit more weight added to the craft, but it means that our thrust weight ratio is much, much better. The Wolfhound engine is still a pretty efficient engine anyway, so we don't need that much. We don't need that much more fuel in order to get our transfer burn done with an acceptable delta V expenditure. Actually, that's not a great choice of words because delta V doesn't change no matter what engine you use. But it means that we didn't have to bring that much extra fuel. Is what I'm trying to get at here. I find the Wolfhound engine is a really, really good balance between good vacuum efficiency, but also having a tolerable thrust to weight ratio, so that long burns, they don't take too much time. And at the end of the day, Duna does not require that much delta V. Like, it's the best part of 1200 meters per second to get there, which really isn't that much. You don't need that much fuel. It's when you go to places like Elu or Moho, or you try and take an Eve lander to Eve, and so you need a bit more delta V because your dry mass is going to be so much heavier. Then the nuclear engine is a bit more warranted, but for short hops to Duna and things like that, I think the Wolfhound engine. I do find myself opting to go with the Wolfhound engine more than I do for the nuclear engine. See, I had to do a bit of a small interplanetary adjustment burn just to get our orbit with Duna, optimal. I often find that this is always the case with Duna missions. Like, I have done Duna missions before where I didn't need to do an adjustment burn halfway to the planet, but I find that's very rarely the case. It's definitely the exception and not the norm. I mean, unless you want to use something like MechJeb or like a mod that allows you to do maneuver nodes more accurately, I'd say pretty much everyone needs to do adjustment burns. Maybe I'm just a terrible player of KSP and I'm not. At the end of the day, the sample size here is 1. I might be unique in having this experience, but I feel like that's a general rule of thumb. Anyway, I'll stop blabbering on because here we are, swooping down to Duna, and I don't see any abandoned ships floating here, so we're all good in terms of radiation performance. We can start our retrograde burn and get ourselves captured because, guys, aero braking is for scrubs. We got to do things not that way. Oh, look, there's a little, see that little target indicator flying across Duna? That will be our Duna base camp space station from the Destination Duna series that I kind of got going on. Yeah, I don't know why I didn't make this episode part of Destination Duna, actually. That's kind of a missed opportunity. But then I did want to kind of make this whole thing like, we send a rover to Duna, they do that, and then the Kerbals go back. Destination Duna is more about establishing a permanent outpost on Duna's surface, which wouldn't really have been as good of a mission, I don't think, for this video. And besides, Destination Duna, the focus is kind of like, everyone is now asking for life on Lathe to return. I mean, everyone asked for life on Lathe to return anyway, but Squad have just announced that Lathe is going to be the planet that gets its... Well, it's not a planet, I know, but go with me. It's going to be the next recipient of updated textures in the next Kerbal Space Program update. And people are asking me, does that mean life on Lathe is coming back? Yes. Of course it means it's coming back at some point. It probably won't come back immediately, like the first week of the update. I'm not going to do life on Lathe, but it will happen at some point this summer, hopefully. So look forward to that. By the way, we've transferred our Kerbals to the Gemini pod so we can get rid of the Apollo capsule. And there you can see that decoupler is still attached to the aerospike. But worry not, I did do a quick test and the aerospike does still work with that decoupler there, so it's all good. And so life on Lathe will be returning, but this brings me back to Destination Duna. Everyone always asks me about life on Lathe. Ain't nobody asking for Destination Duna. And honestly, I would have thought Destination Duna would be a more, I don't know, desirable series, because people seem to, I mean, my Duna videos are always much more successful than any other videos. Like my videos generally, they do really well if it's Mun, Duna, or low Kerbin orbit. Those three, and a bit, and to a slightly lesser extent, Minmus, and then probably Lathe after that. That does seem to be the order of popularity when it comes to destinations to visit in Kerbal Space Program from the perspective of a KSP YouTuber. So that's those are my 2 cents. I was surprised that people want Life on Lathe more than Destination Duna. But then again, I guess I have done proportionally more Duna missions than Lathe missions. Maybe that's part of the reason. I don't know. I mean, I always find there is a bit of a disconnect with what I think you guys want and what you guys actually want. So, I'm always listening to feedback. And there's a beautiful, safe touchdown. And we're going to do some separating of the vessel now to get the rover free. So the first we're going to do is detach that upper skeleton very gracefully in a second. Or what's the order of detachment here? I can't remember. Yeah, we're going to get rid of those. We don't need them anymore. And now there's just dead weight for the Ascension module. And then probably didn't need to have quite so much power in those SRBs to get that thing pulled away. But I wanted to make sure that the rover would definitely be clear of the vessel. As in, like, they wouldn't just crash straight into something in front of it. I want to make sure that thing definitely got clear. At the end of the day, I don't really care if it gets destroyed because we don't need it anymore. And then we can deploy the entrance hatch of the rover. The shroud around the decoupler of that ship has mysteriously disappeared. Just there. The decoupler is still there, but it's still attached, unfortunately. And then Jebediah and Valentina can make their way on board the little turtle rover and get ready to drive around. And this was the part. This is why I should test vehicles. I tested this rover on Kerbin and it worked fairly well, but I was only testing it like on the runway, which is a fairly flat surface. And don't forget, Kerbin's atmosphere is thicker, which is is a fairly significant contributing factor. But more importantly, Kerbin has higher surface gravity than Duna. So on Duna, it flips about and it is far more easy to destroy than it is on Kerbin. So I decided to take it for a quick spin and immediately capsized. So there's going to be lots of crashes and explosions in the next however many minutes this part of the video is going to be. That's just part of the quirk of this rover. I mean, the center of gravity is fairly high. Now, luckily, because the body of the rover is composed of those two Mark II. Oh, here we are now cutting to a different part, but I reloaded the quick save. Didn't last very long. You're now going to see a quick montage of crashes. But no, if you do capsize this rover and nothing is destroyed, it's really easy to flip over because you can just enable the SAS modules on those two Mark II probe cores that flank the chassis, and those are enough to actually just flip the rover whichever direction if it capsizes. So this is a self-righting rover. The weak spot really is that big. There we go again. Luckily, I don't think anything got destroyed on that roll because it was so small. So I can give you a quick demonstration of the self-righting ability. There it is. You can see it can actually hold itself, balancing on its front paws. That's how I'm going to describe it just there. So those SAS wheels are definitely very good. So to disable them, you press Action Group 1, so you can actually drive it, because you can't drive this thing with those SAS wheels enabled. It will just simply try and rotate around on the spot, as in do like front flips instead of just driving forward. So anyway, now we're going to try and use that scanning arm to get some science from one of the surface features that was added in the Breaking Ground DLC. So it needs to be a solid object, so that one won't do. But this one looks more akin to what we want. So we're going to get nice and close, and then we're going to right-click on that scanning arm, and we can get some epic science done. And it's going to be fine, and nothing is going to go wrong, because I did a really good job designing this rover. Oh. I was like, why is it not going? Do you see it in the top left? Insufficient electric charge. Yes, you need 500.3 units of electric charge. I packed a mere 500.
Matt?
Just leave me.
Matthew? Matt?
Just leave
Matt?
me be.
Matt?
Just leave me be.
Matt, what are you doing?
Leave me
Why
be.
are you in the shower?
Just leave me be.
Matt, please put the whiskey down.
Luckily, I reacted in a very mature and calm manner and decided to simply enable infinite electricity. So yes, bit of a cheat. We've now learned this was just the prototype mission. So guys, remember to add an extra battery. It does seem a bit like arbitrary. Like 500.3, really? You couldn't have just rounded that down to it needing just 500 because then we would have been fine. Whatever. We live and learn, don't we? So yeah, you need to add another battery if you want this thing to actually work without the cheats. At the end of the day, I don't actually need to do this. I've got all the tech tree unlocked. I don't need the additional science points. So I figured it wasn't a big deal. I just kind of wanted to show the robot arm in action because I love watching the robot arm. Something so, I don't know, mesmerizing about watching it. Now, don't worry, we will be disabling that cheat before we, leave Duna. I thought I may as well just now I've established I've got it active on the surface of Duna, we may as well just leave it active now just to facilitate our rover expedition. At the end of the day, we're only going to go now back to the ship, so we don't really need all of the electric charge that we would gain from having infinite electricity. Jebediah gracefully disembarks the vessel to collect a surface sample. Don't worry, he's not going to fall over again. And never mind. Spoke soon, it's Jebediah, but look, he's loving it. I personally would probably feel a bit alarmed if I smashed my spacesuit helmet into the surface of a planet with a toxic atmosphere. But Jebediah, he knows no fear. He knows no danger. Some say he knows nothing at all. But that's all speculation. I don't start those rumors. So yeah, so you can just take all the data now from all of our science units. Did we take the I wasn't even really looking at the screen properly. Did we take a surface sample? Worry not, we will at some point. And they can re-embark the vessel, get all those doors closed up again, and we can drive our way back to the return vessel, and hopefully not crash this thing again. Because of course, like I say, it is a very easy to crash car. I'm going to speed up the footage here a little bit, just to make it a little bit more interesting to watch. Jebediah thought he'd take the scenic route back to the ship because, we've got a nice little car. And I really do like the design of this ship. I love seeing, like, cool ways to design rovers because I don't think... Jeb... I don't know. That'll probably buff out, won't it? That'll buff out. Just a bit of polish. Anyway, look at the camera just tumbling there, my goodness. There's another flip. Yeah, it took me a while to get back to the ship. But no, I was saying that I think I speak for not just myself here when I say that. I think you generally develop a style of building things. Like, a lot of my SSTOs look the same to the point where someone will post an SSTO to the KSP subreddit and it will bear some semblance to mine. And a lot of people say, that's like the Matt Lowne style of building space planes. And I think other people have their own sort of, like, I know another example would be Cupcake Landers has got a very... recognizable signature look to his ships. Cupcake Landers, by the way, great channel. You should all go subscribe to Cupcake Landers if you like KSP cinematics. It's like a bit like Into the Warp, but just better made. So that's a summary of that channel. But no, he's got a very unique style to the way his ships look, and like Shadow Zone has his own sort of look to it as well. I can often look at one of his ships and it was Shadow Zone's design. He made it. So I think it's nice to sometimes experiment with different aesthetics, like this one where I obviously, like, again, was inspired by a Reddit post that I saw. Anyway, we are now safely back in almost one piece. We did kind of lose one of the door parts along the way, but it's all fine. At this point, I'd reloaded the quick save so many times that I just couldn't be bothered anymore. I do see that we've actually lost one of the science modules as well, but luckily Jeb took all the data, so it's fine. So we can just do a nice reverse bay park. Jebediah has been practicing doing his reverse bay parking in Velocity Lake's new... it's a crossover! Velocity Lake, we've just built a new car park in that theme park. And so Jebediah has been practicing his parking using that. Everyone, please watch my Planet Coaster videos. You people who... I can't think of a word that would get me monetized, so I'll leave it there. Obviously don't feel obligated to watch my Planet Coaster videos, but people do say, hey Matt, you should just do a podcast. That's my Planet Coaster videos. It's literally just me talking about nothing. I think I went on a 10-minute tangent about guinea pigs a couple of episodes ago. The commentary is basically completely irrelevant to what's going on screen. So if you want a podcast and want to hear more of this for some reason, then it's a good series. You guys should check it out. It's a good series. You might like it. It's a good series. Anyway, Jebediah has done the most crucial component of any KSP mission, which is, of course, planting our flag, and then he can embark the escape vehicle, and we can get ready. Actually, first thing we're going to do is... looks like the rover's flipping us off, doesn't it? Close up the rover for no reason at all other than it satisfies my need to have some sort of closure to its mission, and then we can initiate the kickstand that's going to get this thing into a launchable orientation. We're already pointing about 90 degrees on the nav pole, so we haven't really got to do much more in terms of adjustments. We can just activate those fuel tanks and get this launch underway. The reason those fuel tanks were disabled was to make sure that we didn't lose any fuel during our descent burn. I just wanted it to only be drained from the tank that we expended, which we did. And I think it would have worked anyway. We'd like to just be doubly sure by disabling the tanks I definitely don't want to lose fuel from. And then we can make way back into space. I'm using the aerospike because the aerospike's really good for atmospheric burns, because an aerospike engine, I did do a video about aerospikes very, very recently, so I won't spend too long on them, but an aerospike is a really good engine because it maintains its efficiency throughout an atmosphere and into space. Like, it's pretty much just as efficient in a vacuum as it is at sea level, which is not the case for most engines. Most engines are designed for a specific altitude. You ever tried using the nuclear engines at surface on Kerbin? It doesn't work. So, aerospike's good because it works well at all altitudes, and we'll be using it for the rest of the mission. So I'll be needing it both to escape Duna's atmosphere and also to do our burn back to Kerbin. So I thought the aerospike would be a great choice, and further to this, it has a really, really small compact profile, which again makes it really, really good for use on landers. And there we have it. So now we're going to create a maneuver node and just drag out that prograde marker and see what kind of encounter with Kerbin we can force. And as you can see, the planets really aren't in a very desirable location. It would have taken an absolutely colossal burn to get it anywhere close to Kerbin on our first orbit. So instead what I did was I just lowered our periapsis around the sun to just intersect Kerbin's orbital line, and then we can create a second maneuver node just beyond our solar periapsis and drag on the retrograde, and we can just see those encounter markers just swing around. We get a nice Kerbin encounter on our second orbit around the sun. So that's going to be how we get back to Kerbin. So we're going to perform the biggest of the two burns imminently. We're going to be using that burn indicator that's you can enable it on the settings. I can't remember what it's called now. I think it's called the advanced burn indicator. Why it's not on by default, I don't know. It's that thing that tells you when to start your burn, because ideally you don't start the burn when you reach the maneuver node. It's more efficient to you take the time the maneuver node is going to take, so for example 10 seconds, cut it in half, so that'll be 5 seconds, and then you start your burn with that amount of time remaining before you reach the node. So in the example of a 10-second burn, you would start the burn 5 seconds before you reach the maneuver node. Anyway, we've now done that, and now we can make the second maneuver node that will get us back to Kerbin. So as you can see, much, much smaller Delta V budget. Not that we really have to worry too much about Delta V. I just noticed how much we've got left. We've got quite a bit of... I like just adding a little bit too much fuel to my lander sometimes when I just want to be lazy. And I just want to guarantee that we can definitely make it back. And, I put these crafts in the craft files, and some people might not have been as efficient during the Duna ascent, or might have needed a bit of extra fuel to do something else. Like you might want to do like an Ike flyby or something. So it's always nice to squeeze a little bit of extra Delta V in there if we can. And now we're just going to execute this burn. So I'm just going to do it by eyeballing it. Just got to the maneuver node. I actually overshot it a little bit, actually, I think. And just did the burn pointing the direction of the maneuver node, because the maneuver nodes aren't always that accurate. And I like to do this sort of stuff by eye, because I can see exactly where the apoapsis and periapsis markers are. So we can just zoom in on Kerbin and just watch it. So yeah, bit of a tilt. I don't know why I wanted to go for an equatorial orbit, because we weren't going to be aiming for the KSC or anything. As long as we land in water, it's fine. But I don't know. I think there's just something satisfying about entering Kerbin from a equatorial direction. So that's pretty close. I don't know if I get the periapsis exactly dead on. I think I do one final adjustment once we enter Kerbin's sphere of influence, because I couldn't really get it precise enough. Like, I turned the actual throttle of that engine way down, as in like I right-clicked the engine and reduced the thrust limiter down to a very, very small degree. And even then, doing very, very small burns still shifted the periapsis height by quite a significant amount. So I thought, let's just get a little bit closer to Kerbin, where it takes a little bit more fuel to do these adjustments, so that we can be a little bit more precise with our burns, which we've done it. So now we can swoop down to the atmosphere and get ready to decouple that lower stage. And obviously we'll be protected by that heat shield. And hopefully you guys remember to repack those parachutes on Duna like Jebediah did. And yeah, I mean, I guess it's not the end of the world now if you do forget, because obviously Kerbals have parachute packs. I think I've done at least one mission where either the parachutes didn't deploy because they were in a cargo bay or something and they glitched out, or I literally just forgot to add parachutes. But Kerbals can now just jump out and activate their parachutes and just go down safely anyway. So wouldn't have been a big deal, but it is a little bit more satisfying to have a ship to land in. And obviously they're going to be just floating around in the water. It'd be nice for them to be in some sort of boat to protect themselves. They've got like a nice habitat to live in. Then they are waiting for recovery. Obviously, we can just do that now and see how much science we earned. Ooh, very nice. Obviously, some of that is blood money, blood science, because I got it through using cheats on that robot arm. But whatever. That's it. That's the video. I do hope you enjoyed it, guys. There are links on screen. The one on the left was just chosen for you based on your viewing habits on YouTube. The right-hand side is my most recent upload. Other things, Patreon, subscribe, all that. You guys know how in-screen works. So I'm going to leave it there. Farewell.